This is Initiatives Math class. Once again, we have come to your homes to discuss certain mathematics topics with you. And ever since we started with the solution of mathematics questions, we've had a lot of responses from people who are watching the video, and we select questions based on the responses we get from our viewers. Interestingly, one of the major problems that students and viewers have been having challenges with is word problem. In fact, that is one of the major challenges that we have had from the responses that we've gotten so far. How to analyze word problems. So today we've taken it upon ourselves to come to your various homes with a question on word problem. I'll be very glad if you take your pen and then your paper and then try as much as possible to follow the logic behind how this question is going to be dealt with. So we are pleading with you to take your pen and your paper or your jotter, your book, and try to write every aspect that we're going to discuss here. I would like you to join me so that we read the question on the board and start with the solution. Now let's read the question together. Let's read the question together. There were 42 mangoes in each crate. There were 42 mangoes in each crate. 12 of such crates of mangoes were delivered to a factory. 12 of such crates of mangoes were delivered to a factory. 4 mangoes were rotten and had to be thrown away. 4 mangoes were rotten and had to be thrown away. The remaining mangoes were packed into boxes of 10 mangoes each. The remaining mangoes were packed into boxes of 10 mangoes each. How many boxes of mangoes were there? How many boxes of mangoes were there? In fact, that is the problem of the day. The word problem that we want to discuss together. In fact, whenever a question like this is given, the first thing that the student needs to find out is the demand of the question. The first thing is to check from the question what the question actually is demanding from the student. And clearly, when you read the question, the latter part says how many boxes of mangoes were there. But that is where the emphasis should be placed. And that is the demand of the question. That how many boxes of mangoes were there. Again, when it comes to word problem, the student should try to do analysis as he is reading the question. Because if you want to finish reading everything and then answer the question, by the time you get down there, you might have forgotten what you started reading, the facts in there. So it is better you do your analysis. You do your analysis from the first sentence followed by the second sentence till you exhaust all the question that is on the board or that is given to you to solve. So let's try to do one or two analysis, because we know for now ours is to find the number of boxes that were there. How many boxes of mangoes were there? Now, solution. There were 42 mangoes in each crate. There were 42 mangoes in each crate. So you start by analyzing it. Number of mangoes in a crate. Number of mangoes in a crate is equal to 42. This fact should be established. This fact should be established. So the moment you look at it, number of boxes in a crate is 42. Okay, that point has been established. Again, 12 of such crates of mangoes were delivered to a factory. So you ask yourself this question: how many crates of mangoes were delivered to the factory? Number of crates of mangoes, number of crates of mangoes delivered to the factory is 12. Another point has also been established. Number of crates of mangoes delivered to the factory. So like I told you before, these facts must be established. And when you establish them and you just look at it, you remember what you are trying to get out of the whole question. And at a glance, the question itself is summarized in the point that you have established. So number of mangoes in a crate is equal to 42. And the number of crates of mangoes delivered to the factory is 12. Good. Again, in the question, it has also been stated that when the mangoes were being delivered to the factory, 4 of them got rotten when they were sending the mangoes to the factory. 4 mangoes were rotten. So, number of mangoes rotten is equal to 4. So, these points we are establishing in effect are summarizing the question itself. Again, the remaining mangoes were packed into boxes of 10 mangoes each. The remaining mangoes were packed into boxes of 10 mangoes each. Now let's try to analyze it this way. When the mangoes were delivered to the factory, boxes were made available to contain the number of mangoes, not crates, but they delivered the mangoes in crates, but boxes were made available to contain the 12 crates of mangoes that were delivered to the factory. So the question is now telling us to find out the number of boxes that were able to contain the remaining mangoes after they took 4 of the rotten mangoes out. So now, let's come back here and write another fact. number of mangoes in each box. Number of mangoes in each box. Number of mangoes. Number of mangoes in each box. Number of mangoes in each box, according to the question, is 10. In other words, each box was able to contain 10 mangoes. Number of mangoes in each box is 10. So we have this information available to us. The question is, how many boxes of mangoes were made available to contain the mangoes that were delivered at the factory? Okay. Let's, in the first place, find out the number of mangoes that finally reached the factory. That is what we are going to find out. We are going to find out the number of mangoes that reached the factory. So how do we find the number of mangoes that reached the factory? We can find the number of mangoes that reached the factory by calculating the number of mangoes that were in the 12 crates that were sent to the factory. The number of mangoes that were in the 12 crates that were sent to the factory. Then we subtract the rotten mangoes from the number of mangoes that were in the 12 crates of mangoes. So when you subtract the rotten mangoes from the number of mangoes that were in the 12 crates of mangoes, we'll be left with the number of mangoes that actually reached the factory for processing. Because rotten mangoes cannot be used for processing. And when it got there, those people at the factory needed to make certain things available and carry the mangoes into the processing unit. So, from the question, they made a certain number of boxes available to contain the number of mangoes that were brought at the factory. So the question is asking us, how many boxes were there? How many boxes were presented to carry the mangoes that were in the crates? Because they use crates to deliver the mango at the factory. So now let's calculate the number of mangoes that were in the 12 crates. For instance, if 2 people are carrying 5 mangoes each, 2 people are carrying 5 mangoes each. If you should ask a class 1 student to tell you the number of mangoes that are with the 2 people, it is simply 5 times 2, because each person is carrying 5 mangoes. So you multiply the number of mangoes with each person by the number of people in question. So in this case, if you have 2 people carrying 5 mangoes each, then it means you multiply 5 by 2. That will give you the total mangoes. But here we have the number of mangoes in a crate. Each crate is 42. So the total number of mangoes, number of mangoes in the crate will be the total number of mangoes. The total number of mangoes that were sent to the factory. The total number of mangoes that were sent to the factory. The total number of mangoes that were sent to the factory. We know each crate was containing 42 mangoes. And in this case, we have 12 crates. And that will be 12 times 42. Because each crate is containing 42 mangoes. And that will be 42 times 12. Because we have 12 crates. We have 12 crates. 42 times 12 will give us 504 mangoes. 504 mangoes. So it means 504 mangoes were delivered at the factory. 504 mangoes were delivered at the factory. Total number of mangoes that were sent to the factory. 504 mangoes were delivered at the factory because each crate was containing 42 mangoes. So that point 2 has also been established. Now we know the number of mangoes that were sent in. In the question we have number of mangoes rotten is equal to 4. 4 mangoes were rotten. 4 mangoes were rotten when it reached the factory. So if 4 mangoes were rotten when it reached the factory, we need to know the number of mangoes that were actually carried by the people or sent to the processing unit. Because rotten mangoes cannot be used to process anything. So number of mangoes that were carried. Number of mangoes that were carried by the boxes will be equal to the number of mangoes that reached the minus the rotten mangoes. Because if you read the question says 4 mangoes were rotten and had to be thrown away. So 4 mangoes were rotten and had to be thrown away. So it means 4 mangoes were thrown away. So we need the number of mangoes that were carried by the boxes. In other words, they did not carry the rotten mangoes together with the mangoes that were not rotten. So that mangoes needs to be taken away from the mangoes that reached the factory. And that will be 504 minus 4. That is the rotten mangoes. So this one will give us 500. This one will give us 500. The rotten mangoes have been taken out from the real mangoes that will be used for the processing. So that rotten mangoes have been taken out. So the real mangoes left for processing is now 500. But the logic here is that when the people, let's assume people send the mangoes there. Of course, people sent the mangoes there. They delivered the mangoes at the factory. But they sent the mangoes in crates. And boxes were made available to contain the mangoes into the processing unit. So the question now is, how many boxes of mangoes were there? How many boxes of mangoes can carry 500 mangoes? That is the point. And that is the demand of the question. So if you are a boss of an institution and then you are told that 500 mangoes have reached your processing point, bring certain things, bring some containers for delivery, then you need to calculate and find out the number of boxes that you are supposed to make it available to contain the 500 mangoes that are at the factory point. So the question is, as a manager or as a boss of that factory, how many boxes would you make available, knowing that each box can contain 10 mangoes? Can contain 10 mangoes. Each box can contain 10 mangoes. The number of boxes that should be made available is, you need to find the number of tens. The number of tens in 500. You group the mangoes into 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And each 10 can be contained in a box. So if you group it 10, 10, 10, 10, each 10 represents a box, because each box can contain 10 mangoes. So if this logic is really understood, then if you want to find the number of boxes, the number of boxes will be equal to the 500 mangoes. If you are dividing them into 10, 10, 10, 10, you divide it by 10. That is the number of tens in 500. 0 will cancel 0, and then you'll be having 50 boxes. 50 boxes were there. 50 boxes were there. 50 boxes were there. So if the question is asking how many boxes of mangoes were there, then it is simply 50 boxes should be made available to contain the 500 mangoes. Once again, this is Initiative Smart Class. You have come your way again to your various homes again with a question on word problem. In fact, you need to take your time and do serious analysis of the logic that the question wants each student to display to solve this particular question. Like I told you, if you want to read all the question and then understand it at once, you'll find yourself wanting. It is better you break it into pieces, establish points, and then finally get the demand of the question, and then you start with your analysis. May God bless you wherever you are as you continue to watch our videos. We urge you to like, follow, and share the video to your colleagues so they can equally enjoy Initiative Math online class. God bless you so much. Bye-bye.